Monson exerted all his willpower to remain calm. "Grayson, who are you? And what happened to your accent?" Grayson answered slyly, "That's right. I haven't introduced myself, have I? My name is Grayson G. Garrett. I am a warden's apprentice for Humane. My code name is Ender." "Ender?" The smile vanished from Grayson's face. "You're kidding me, right?" "No." Grayson gripped the wheels of his chair, pivoting it towards one of the many bookshelves. Scanning the contents, he settled on a small paperback, pulled it out with a jerk, and tossed it to Monson. "So we don't have any confusion in the future." Monson surveyed the title. "Ender's Game?" Grayson grinned. "Just think of me as Ender." Monson tucked the book in his back pocket. "If you say so. But back to the topic at hand. You're part of some secret organization?" "Correct." "A secret organization that uses magic?" "Also correct." "And you are here at Corrin because you think I'm some sort of chosen one?" "Yes, that is all correct." "And how do you know this?" Now that is an excellent question. Grayson wheeled over to his counter, maneuvering to grab a set of teacups. Next, he touched a black dispenser, which Monson could only assume was hot water, and placed some tea bags in the cups. The cups filled with steaming liquid, and he moved back towards Monson. "To answer you, the organization isn't totally positive that you really are our chosen one. But the ancient texts aren't exactly clear on the issue. But we think that you are the link to the chosen one and the world of the others that we've been looking for. If that is the case, then there is much work to be done." Monson's lip curled skeptically. "So I'm not the chosen one, then?" "You could be." "I could be." Monson sighed. "Okay, what's this world's business? You said that this being of 7 bloods is supposed to save the worlds? What does that mean?" Grayson affixed a supercilious grin to his face. Monson replied with a cynical glare. "You don't know that either?" Grayson answered, clearly annoyed. "The chosen one is supposed to save worlds." "That's something else we aren't exactly clear on. The text clearly says worlds, but we aren't sure if that was metaphorically or not." "That's confusing." Monson pressed his lips together in irritation. "Okay, instead of me just asking questions blindly, why don't you tell me what you do know?" "We know this." Grayson pushed a sketch pad across the table. He nodded towards it, indicating that Monson should open the book. "It's true that you weren't the only one at the bridge that day. I was also there, but being sensitive, everything I saw was much different than what got reported in the papers." Pad already open, Monson scrutinized the pencil drawing of a long stretch of bridged roadway that carried into the paper's illusionary distance. The picture's projection provided a striking amount of detail and gave the impression to whoever was looking that they were gazing into the horizon. Monson placed the book back on the table to examine it closer. The picture illustrated a horrific scene. Many bodies of men and women sat scattered along the roadside in various states of death. Winged demonic apparitions, suspended in midair, prodded the dead or dying with wicked poleaxe-like weapons that were borderline fantastical in their construction. In the very center of the page, but off in the distance, a single individual stood with wiggled lines radiating from him. The drawing was absolutely beautiful, but hardly helpful. "This is wonderful, Grayson, but—" "I know," interjected Grayson respectfully. "That's not what you really needed to see. It's for background purposes. Turn the page." Monson did so, squinting as the page's viewpoint altered. This new picture gave a sideways panorama of a massive sea-floating bridge, with odd meshing lines streaming from the exact center of the picture. The lines flowed from that center position, ripping and shredding through tiny, but distinct, cars, railings, and people. Closer to the middle of the picture, where the lines seemed to originate from, Monson noticed chunks of steel and cement flying in every direction, like a child crushing crackers in their minuscule hands. Monson flipped the page again. Yet another picture of the bridge's destruction, but farther along in the process. Much larger pieces and objects fell from the bridge as the lines, which appeared to be some sort of unearthly energy flow, lengthened, widened, and sprawled out in every direction, engulfing everything in their power. Monson turned the page a final time. The last drawing showed a landscape version of a once mighty structure. All appeared serene, except for a single droplet, a small speck seen in the distance, dropping through the air to the water below. The speck, despite its obvious size, was clearly the focus of this final panel. The emphasis of the picture plainly said, whatever that speck was, it was significant. Monson shifted his eyes, focusing on Grayson. "What is this?" "A clearer view of the events of Barty Bridge," answered Grayson quietly. "Whatever happened on that bridge that day was not something scientific in nature. Well, not scientific in the way humans understand it." Monson slid the book back to Grayson. "Why do you say that?" Grayson opened the book and pointed to the first picture. "Do you see these lines, the ones that are ripping the bridge apart?" Monson nodded. "Now, think back. Have you ever heard of anything that describes this type of phenomenon to the public?" Monson found that he could not think of anything even closely related to an event like that. "No, definitely not. I've never heard of anything resembling this." "Why do you think that is?" Monson sat back in his chair. Why indeed? That was the question, right? There were no reports about a weird energy source. Actually, all the experts say that the bridge blew from underneath, that the destruction to the underlying foundation was the reason for the collapse of the bridge. It was part of the reason that Monson's grandfather was blamed for the attack on the bridge, as apparently he designed a weapon with that specific purpose in mind. Now Grayson was telling him that some sort of crazy overload of energy brought about all the destruction that day, and who knew if it had anything to do with his grandfather. Monson focused on the energy, trying not to get sidetracked. He snapped his fingers as the image of Casey popped into his head. Flash Fist! Grayson leaned forward, as if to hear him better. What was that, Gray? It was just like Casey's Flash Fist. I am, or was, the only one that could see it. It was the same with the bridge. The people couldn't see the chakra. All that stuff had to have been chakra. Chakra? As in the 7 pathways of the chakra? Monson waved away the question. I have no idea what that is. I'm talking about chakra, as in the stuff that Casey uses to fight in his martial art. He expels energy from his body and then collects it in a move he calls the Flash Fist. Whoa. Grayson rubbed at his chin. Wicked. I know, right? But back to the bridge thing. So, you're saying that the bridge was destroyed by some sort of magic? Yes. It had to have been key manipulation, though that alone seems impossible. Monson glowered in confusion, his head hanging low and wobbling back and forth. Grayson surveyed him affectionately. Allow me to explain. Magic is called key. At least, that's what it sounded like when Grandfather told us. Magic usage, or the manipulation of key, has 2 kinds, AoE or scripting. Monson's eyebrow shot up. AoE or scripting, huh? Why 2 names? Because they have different forms, functions, difficulty, and possibilities. Monson perked up a bit. Cool. Grayson chuckled. As far as we can tell, key, or magic as you call it, is inside everyone, everything, all creations. If it has substance, it has magic. Monson interrupted excitedly. How on earth is that possible? Hold on, Monson, said Grayson, reverting back to his southern drawl. I'm a-getting there. As far as we know, which is very little compared to how much we would like to know, there isn't anyone that can see internal ki. This is the power that permeates our bodies like an internal delivery system, much like that of our blood vessels. Ki travels through this system connecting the spiritual to the physical. Think of it as a circulatory system for the soul. The manipulation of these traveling systems is what produces magical effects. Now, notice I said that no one can see internal ki, meaning people can't see the magic in a dormant state. But when people release and manipulate it, now that's a different story. Again, Casey flashed through Monson's mind. He kept quiet, however. Now don't get me wrong, most people can't see external ki either, even if it is being released. But there are a few who can. We call these people power sensitive, or sentinels for short. People who are power sensitive are then taken and trained. Grayson's pause for a breath allowed Monson a question. How do you know who are power sensitive? Grayson smirked. Excellent question. There are a variety of ways, but the most consistent and reliable one is a device that my grandfather designed and my father created called a counter. It can detect ki levels from sentinels. Most people don't know much about their talents, so they release ki unknowingly. Some even get to the point where they can manipulate it on their own. The counter finds these people. Monson spoke thoughtfully. You know, that reminds me a lot of Dragon Ball Z. Grayson's smile stretched from cheek to cheek. I love that show. Monson laughed. Yeah, me too. Grayson continued. Anyway, like I said, people that are found are then taken and trained. They become operatives of humane, or human users of magic and necromantic exploration. The people who drew these pictures are all humane agents. They were able to see what was really happening on that bridge, paying off of our efforts of following you. Which brings me to my next two questions. Why were you following me, and why did you draw pictures? Why didn't you just use a camera or something? The latter question is an easy one. Magic does freaky stuff to electronics or non-key technology. You didn't have key technology on the bridge? Another excellent observation. Yes, we did. But whatever was on that bridge overloaded it. Overloaded everything key, mechanical, or electronic. Monson nodded. The first question is a bit tougher to explain. Let's just say that we made contact at the Horenveer competition. We had a couple of our agents there, and by pure chance, one of them witnessed the scripting of ki. Monson started to rub at his temples. I feel like I'm taking a spelling test with vocabulary I've never heard of. Grayson refilled his teacup, adding an extra bag as he did. Let me back up and explain. The easiest way to manipulate ki is through your hands. Not the only way, but definitely the easiest. The most basic mode of supernatural manipulation is through this process. You release your ki from your hands, saturating your surroundings, then anything that comes in contact with that power is able to be manipulated. For example, Grayson straightened out his hand, pointing it towards one of the towers of books. Seconds passed, and nothing happened. Until a single book slid out from the shelf and landed with a thud on the floor. Monson raised his eyebrow at Grayson. Whoa, said Monson, impressed. Whoa, indeed. This style of magic is called the area of influence, or the AoE. Note that ki functions a great deal like any other type of energy, in that its effectiveness will diminish with time and distance. Again, take me as an example. My area of influence is only about 12 feet, and that is for very minor manipulations. Grayson paused, opening the sketchbook again. The second type of magic manipulation is vastly more difficult, but much more effective, at least in theory. In theory? Monson watched as Grayson flipped the pages. Yes, in theory. The second type is called scripting. Little is known about the process, but most of our researchers believe that scripting takes 3 key elements: the heart, the hand, and the word. The heart's power, the hand's path, and the word's grip. Monson interrupted, confused. So what's the difference between scripting and AoE? It's difficult to explain without totally confusing you. Grayson rubbed at his face, thinking. Let me try this. Think of electricity. What can electricity do? Monson played along. A lot. Everything is powered by electricity. I mean, everything from appliances to video games. Exactly. Grayson beamed. Electricity is the source of power that enables technology to function. Computers, microwaves, projectors, everything. Without electricity, we would be in the Stone Age. Key manipulation, or AoE, is like trying to get electricity to do everything that all those machines can do. It doesn't work that way. Why? Because electricity isn't supposed to be able to do all the things the machine can do, only power it. Electricity is a source of energy that allows the other parts, whether they be a circuit in a computer, the plasma in a television, or the navigation system of a satellite, to operate. AoE manipulation of ki uses the same concept. That's why it's so limited. On the other hand, scripting takes ki and places it into a form that can do a much greater array of things, just like technology. I can't explain the details because I don't know, but it has to do with those 3 elements I mentioned. Think of it this way. Ki is the fuel or power, and scripting is the part that allows a magic user to accomplish whatever it is they're trying to do. Monson interrupted Grayson again. That seems simple enough, but why do you consider it a theory? Grayson scowled. Because we haven't had a successful scripting yet in the organization. There isn't an agent in Humane that can script. Grandfather wrote about it, and we've been researching it ever since. We've made progress. We feel like we're getting close. We just aren't there yet. That's why when the man at the Horenveer competition saw scripting, it was so unbelievable. Our agents did not quite know what to make of it. Monson sat back in his chair. He wanted to ask more questions about it, but there did not seem to be much use at this point. Okay, let's leave ki and scripting for a minute. You keep talking about your organization's theories and scientists. Why don't you tell me about Humane and how you have all this information? Grayson nodded. As you wish, but I warn you, it's a long story. We've got time. Then I'll explain as much as I can. He sat back in his chair, stirring his tea, a benign look on his face. A little more than 65 years ago, right around the end of the Second World War, Germany was in a bind. The wars on both the Eastern and Western fronts were going very badly. They were searching desperately for anything that might change what seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Wait, don't tell me. Monson stirred his tea absent-mindedly. I think I've heard this one. They were searching for legendary power, they found it, and then ended up dying in the process. What? I know I've seen at least one Indiana Jones movie on this exact topic. Monson looked around. Am I being punked? Of course not. Grayson spat with a little snap. Though I do love watching reruns of that show, and the Indiana Jones movies are some of my favorite. It's a pity he died in Indiana 5. Grayson resettled himself. You are correct in that Hitler was looking for power in any conceivable form, whether it was natural, demonic, or divine. He had his people research every folktale, ghost story, and myth in the hopes that he could find something to turn the tides. What they found was this. Grayson picked up a large leather-bound book with a huge rune on the cover of it. The book seemed quite old, but it hardly appeared as if it contained the mysteries of the world. Monson, though he tried not to look it, felt more than a little dissatisfied. A book? What were they going to do to the Allies? Paper cut them to death? O ye of little faith! Just look. Monson pulled the thick book closer to him, looking at the massive rune on the cover, and then let his gaze drop to a single word written in German right below it. He visually sized up the rune. It was of a curious nature, almost alien, a structure or rendition that he could not even begin to describe. It reminded him of a combination of all the old rune-based languages they studied in Mr. Gatt's class. Fascinated, he flipped open the volume to reveal, as far as he could tell, an old, but entirely ordinary journal. Written mostly in German, it contained all kinds of pictures, both drawn and photographed, spammed together and marked with indiscernible text and symbols. He examined the book with enthusiasm until he came to a drawing of what appeared to be a chainmail glove. Next to this rather detailed drawing, he saw a very glossy picture of the exact same glove. The glove looked normal enough, though Monson could tell the artisanship was excellent. The most prominent feature of the glove was a strong metal plate attached to the top, almost like a guard, something that could be used to block a blow from a sword or other weapon. There was also an indentation or void on the plate, like there was some sort of decoration missing. What am I looking at? Monson ran an unsure finger over the picture of the glove. This is the record of one of the information officers of a specialty unit of the German army, based out of the Aachenerba Institute. My grandfather's, actually. The unit was charged with several missions under orders from Heinrich Himmler to discover archaeological relics that could turn the tide of the war. Okay, but what about the weird marks and glove? Again, we don't know for sure. There is some indication that it's supposedly some kind of weapon. Grayson reached over, fingering some of the pages. This journal documents an exhibition to the Alps where some researchers at the Institute heard a tale of some kind of ancient reception hall deep within the mountain range. This hall supposedly contained everything from the Fountain of Youth to a legion of archangels. They aren't really even sure of the path they took, but after a series of weird events, they somehow found the entrance to the cave and, after a lot of sacrifice, made their way to this. Grayson turned to a page in the center of the book. It was a drawing of a massive hall, something that you would expect to see in some made-up world, complete with enormous pillars, dozens of meters in diameter, and oddly carved. Ascertaining much more information than that, however, was unlikely, as the drawing was one of limited dimension. Yet, the picture and room did make one thing clear from the way it was constructed. This large underground cutout had a purpose, and that purpose seemed to lay at the center of the hallway. Before Monson could ask any questions, Grayson flipped the page while he indicated that the next picture was just a continuation of the depicted location. Monson studied this next picture. In the very center of the hall, a gigantic structure covered with scattered symbols and drawings sat looming. There was no way of knowing its true dimensions, but Monson's gut was screaming at him. Large and important. This thing was incredibly large and equally important. Repeating his page flipping, Grayson showed Monson a half a dozen other drawings of varying size and seeming importance, before turning to a sort of master guide type of page. This page gives details of everything I just showed you. Grayson pointed at various numbers and their corresponding subscripts. He read the German text, translating directly. Columns, many feet in diameter, held up massive archways that seemed to rise to the very top of the mountain. Strikingly elaborate, the central chamber is a truly magnificent edifice, with fountains of sweet-smelling waters, troves of exotic weaponry and cultural icons, and though I can't say for sure, it seems that there are remains from every major military power from the last 10,000 years. This room is like a time capsule for history, and not only human history. Remains? Like, as in bodies? More or less. Grayson glanced up from the book. Bodies, weapons, records, thousands of years of history stored in almost perfect condition. I don't think you get it, Gray. Maps of an unnamed supercontinent, detailed accounts of other humanoid-like beings, scrolls from the library in Alexandria. Seriously, you name it, this place had it. Perfectly categorized and organized by who knows. And that's not even getting into the more mystic aspects of the central chamber. It was truly one of the greatest historic finds of all time. My grandfather speculated that it could have held the mysteries of creation, and that hall and center building was probably one of the oldest structures in existence. Monson threw in an objection. Wait, I'm having a hard time visualizing this place. How big was it? Because from what you're saying, the drawings aren't really doing it justice. Grayson considered the question. Have you seen Lord of the Rings? Yeah, actually, we watched it not too long ago. Grayson beamed. Good. Do you remember when the Fellowship entered the mountains of Moria in the first movie? Monson pictured the scene in his head. Yeah. Why? That hall could not hold a candle to this place. Huge, Gray. Absolutely huge. Monson took in the information, processing as he asked his next question. Okay, this tower thing? What was that all about? Was it inside the hall? Grayson nodded. Yes, Grandfather tried to document every detail. He started to read. Currently we're at the base of the structure that I have deemed the tower. The tower appears to be the reason for the construction of the massive hall, so we figured that this would be the best place to begin our search for information. I wish I could draw a picture that could truly embody this amazing building, but alas, one would have to see it to truly understand. Despite this, I feel the need to at least record its dimensions. It is extremely large, at least a quarter mile on each side of its square construction, which appears to be carved directly out of the mountain. Every inch of the tower is covered with some sort of decoration. Paintings, carvings, and the like are all over the structure. Much of the art I do not recognize, much less understand. The structure also does not appear to be uniform in its construction, though I cannot say for sure, as the first 100 feet or so up the edifice is completely smooth. Grayson's voice died off. We can stop there, but you get the point, I think. So, what happened? Monson could not believe that such a structure would be ignored. Why haven't I heard about it? A discovery like that would be world-renowned. Of course it would, and I'll explain, but let me get through this part first. The exhibition started exploring the central chamber and offshoots, only to find room after room after room of treasures, art, books, everything I just mentioned. It should have been the discovery of lifetimes to come. Grayson finished his thought and wheeled over to the refrigerator. He touched a button on his chair before he reached the appliance and then waited patiently until the refrigerator door retracted. He snagged 2 bottles of water and tossed one to Monson. He twisted the top off of his water as he spoke. This next part of the story gets dicey. My grandfather was adamant, almost obsessive about the tower. Grandfather was convinced that something of great importance lied within this tower, like there was something that had to be found and understood. This is the reason that the tower drawings are so detailed. He obstinately felt that someone had to know about the place. Monson frowned. I'm assuming things didn't go well. Grayson let out an ironic chuckle. No, they didn't. Grandfather looked, but couldn't find anything that would help him to get to the inner chambers of the tower. Or for that matter, if there was an inner chamber at all. After a couple weeks of searching and turning up very little, the supplies started to run low, and, stranger things started happening.
Wait, back up a second. Why was your grandfather so convinced that there was something beyond or within this tower? From one of the marks at the base of the tower's lowest levels.
Grayson found the corresponding illustration and showed Monson. Monson studied the picture.
Yeah, I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. I don't either, and I'm a genius. We think that there is something fundamental missing in Grandfather's description of the space or map. The only translation we have is path to power. Under this description, Grandfather simply wrote, skyward. I guess I can't argue with that. So, what about the strange events you mentioned? What kind of stuff happened? The kind that you don't expect to come across in legitimate history books.
Grayson shifted tensely.
The ethereal kind. Oh.
Monson sat, looking reflective. Grayson eyed Monson for a moment. Then, with a small twitch of his lips, he said,
You don't know what ethereal means, do you? Not a clue.
Monson proffered a cheesy grin.
Most would call what they saw or experienced supernatural. As in ghosts? Something like that, though I don't necessarily think it was ghosts, but they weren't very specific. What he did say in the record was that the men were having strange visions, hearing voices, and other weird phenomenon. So, what'd he do? Grandfather had almost given up hope at that time. We know exactly what he was thinking since he wrote about it extensively. They were about to start back to the entrance when something renewed his conviction. He had a dream. A dream?
Monson's eyebrow shot up. This was getting into his territory now. Grayson continued.
The journal details the dream in all its strange glory. Much of it is incoherent babble. Paths, gatekeepers, and powers, all an allusion to the natural, heightened, and perfective states of being. The dream also contrasted two symbols, though we have yet to figure out what those symbols mean. I would be here all day if I tried to describe everything he wrote, and really, none of us understands most of it. Regardless, the dream did give him a direction, and that direction was up. He then decided to do something drastic. Drastic? Said Monson, now thoroughly caught up in the story. Like what? Try to blow it open? No, he thought that would be too dangerous, though it certainly crossed his mind. No, the dream told him to go up. So, up he went. He decided to scale the tower, to see if it might lead to results. Scale it? What would that do? How was that going to help? Grayson flipped back to the drawing of the tower. The picture doesn't depict it very well, but the tower wasn't totally smooth and flat on its surface. He pointed to a darkened place about halfway up the picture. Monson stared, straining to see. It was as if there was something there, just beyond the surface of the tiles. Grayson's voice again spoke up. My grandfather thought that this point right here could be wide enough for people to walk along, and that there might be some type of access to the higher plateaus on the tower. So, he thought he'd try. What did they find? A great deal. Grayson's voice regained its enigmatic quality. Despite that, though, things started to get progressively more strange. Grandfather's record early on in the events indicates that his men were starting to act funny and do totally unexpected things. One committed suicide, another ran from the center into the caves where they had come from and was never seen again. 2 more got violently ill to the point where they couldn't even be moved. That's terrible, said Monson, as he felt pity well up at the turn of events. Why didn't they just leave? Because all of them, including my grandfather, thought the discovery was too important to leave without a complete workup of what might lie there. When I was younger, my dad and I used to speculate on what would have happened if they had only gone that far. This single event has dominated the path of my family for over 60 years. It's funny how those things happen sometimes.
Grayson shook his head, as if to bring himself back to reality, then continued.
Grandfather was able to scale the tower with the help of his remaining men, and just like he hypothesized, a ledge-like landing about 4 feet wide sat waiting for him. Once on the landing, they found a staircase hidden behind one of the large statues. The staircase took him up many floors, 8 in all. He remarked that each level seemed to be devoted to a being of some sort. He didn't know if they were gods, demons, plants, or a combination of the 3. He just said that these floors were a representation of something. Something old and something very significant.
Grayson again flipped the book to another page, which depicted a full-page drawing of, "Is that what I think it is?" Monson scrutinized the page, not totally sure how to react to it.
I see that you recognize it. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's supposed to be an angel.
The picture was done in greater detail than even the tower drawings. It displayed a painting of a being with long dark hair, demure hands, and large, fully spread angel wings. Monson was not able to tell if the being was supposed to be male or female, seeing as its back was to the viewer. It did not matter, however, because the artist's point was very clear in this representation. Power and grace beyond all human comprehension.
The journal goes on,
continued Grayson as Monson still examined the drawing.
There are 6 more of these representations, each having a colored theme. Our angel there seems to be connected to the color blue, but each floor had its respective being and color.
Monson interjected, ignoring the color reference.
Wait, I thought you said there were 8.
Grayson stared at him confused. The look was not a flattering one for him, probably because he was rarely actually confused. Monson explained.
You said that there were 8 levels. Why are there only 7 beings? Or was that 8th level not included in the being worship or colored decorations?
Grayson's eyes popped in surprise.
You're a sharp one, Gray. Has anyone ever told you that?
Monson chuckled, letting out the building tension.
Yeah, I've heard that once or twice.
Grayson smiled at Monson's lack of modesty.
Funny you'd focus on the 8th floor, as that is the exact topic of our current discussion. The 8th floor is really why we're here. It's the reason for everything. The organization, my grandfather's death, my family's path and destiny. Everything. Before I continue, you should know that when Grandfather arrived on the 8th floor, he was shocked to see that it was completely trashed, like someone was trying to hide what was there.
Monson cut in again.
Didn't you just say that the 8th floor was the reason for...
Grayson put up a hand.
In the hopes of finding something, some idea of where this structure came from and why it was created, or why the 8th floor was destroyed when everything else was in perfect condition. Grandfather searched and searched and searched. Finally, he caught a lucky break. He found a secret room that he said contained the single most important discovery in the history of this world. He discovered this.
Grayson flipped the journal to the very last pages of the book. What was on the page caused Monson to gasp. It was a photograph, not a sketch, of a mural, which depicted colored crowns of millions of indistinct people. The mural was highly detailed in the oddest of places, and less so in others. The being that stood foremost among the crowds was surprisingly clouded, as if the artist was not quite sure what his model looked like. Above this rather strange rendition, there were shadowy depictions of mystical creatures that Monson could have sworn resembled beings or characters out of myth and legend. It was like the artist took the root of every type of fantasy creature, stripped it down to its bare essence, and placed it in this picture. Or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe all the ideas of fantasy and myth came from this picture. Monson was not sure anymore. He pulled the book closer, tracing his finger towards each of the beings illustrated in the mural. A small grayish haze, done ever so slightly, sprung out around the central being, as if he was taking his spirit or existence and drawing the others towards him. Monson studied a bit more, focusing on the central character. The essence, it looked like he was making them a part of him, as if he was... Realization struck Monson.
This is the reason for your organization. You're trying to find the being depicted in this mural. They call him the Being of Seven Bloods. The whole of the mural has been lost on us, but the rest of it supposedly had this being and companions traveling to fix something that went terribly wrong, to fix something that went so wrong that if it doesn't get fixed, we are all doomed. Everyone, you, me, all who live in this world and at least a couple of others. We can only guess at its meaning. Grandfather usually added his notes and speculations right behind a sketch or photo, but the pages right after this were torn out.
Monson gulped.
What happened to them? What do you think was on them?
Grayson hung his head.
I wish I knew.
He looked back up, making eye contact with Monson.
So, to conclude the story, Grandfather was the only one to make it out of that cave alive. Something attacked them. Not even Grandfather knew what, but the rest of his men sacrificed themselves to allow him to live. He tried to make a break while his men fought to detain whatever it was that attacked them. He tried to run, only to escape to a place he deemed the Caverns of Salt. Grandfather wrote of the screams of his men as they echoed off the enclosed spaces, and how, shortly after he left them, all went silent except the thump of heavy footsteps. Cornered in the caverns, he said his final prayer as the darkness stalked him. It was in that darkest hour that something came and rescued him. A woman, Gray. A woman like you've never seen.
Strained fingers pulled at a previously unseen final sheet of paper. Monson released a puff of air in awe. He gazed at the portrait of a woman, unlike any other in the history of the world, of any world. She was like a goddess given physical form, with beautiful platinum eyes and long, silver platinum hair. Her clothing was just as fluid, like a liquid metal that did not hang on her body, but hovered just above it. Monson's head went fuzzy. He wanted to ask who she was, but could not find the words. Words. They seemed so unimportant right now. What did he really need words for anyway? All he really needed was to sit. Grayson interrupted him this time.
Soraya. She called herself Soraya. Soraya, thought Monson. What a beautiful name.
Grayson concluded his story.
Soraya was the key, Gray. The key to all of this. It was because of her that Humane was created, that we have the limited amount of knowledge we currently possess. It was all her. She told Grandfather that all must travel their own pathway to power, and finding the being of Seven Bloods was a part of that path. And now, we get back to your question concerning the discovery of the hall and why it wasn't reported. Grandfather escaped with Soraya's help. He never did return to Germany or report the existence of the hall or the tower to his superiors. He came to the United States and, with the treasure that Soraya provided him, created Humane, and then died not long after. We've been looking for the being of Seven Bloods ever since.
Monson Grey and Grayson Garrett sat in silence, allowing the words and their significance to sink in. In the twist and turn of unsure quiet, Monson made a decision.
Grayson, I hope you haven't gotten tired of me, because I think it's about time I tell you a story. Hopefully together, our stories will make sense.
Monson talked and talked and talked. He talked for the better part of an hour, trying to leave as little as possible out of his story. He talked about the weird happenings surrounding his interactions with Casey, Artorius, Kylie, Cyan, and all the rest. He told him about how he had this weird knowledge of stuff that he could not explain or comprehend, and that it kicked in at the weirdest of times. He told him about the scars, both emotional and physical, that weighed him down. He spoke of his past and what little he could remember of it. Finally, he told him about the times when he looked at his reflection, and his reflection would look back at him.
Wait, stop there.
Grayson's face held a look of consideration.
Clarify something. What do you mean your reflection would look back? Isn't that what a reflection is supposed to do? No. A reflection should mirror the original. That's the definition of a reflection. This one did not.
Monson shuddered as he recalled the experience.
I would look at my reflection in a window or a mirror, and it looked back at me. I could see it in his eyes, my eyes. It wasn't me. I thought I was going crazy until last night when I had a dream where I actually spoke with my reflection. I actually spoke with myself. Amazing.
Grayson rubbed at his face as he ruminated.
And that's what led to what happened in the atrium? Yeah, sort of,
said Monson, his suspicions finally confirmed.
So, you were there? Yeah, but I was lucky, that's all.
Grayson smiled.
Happened to be there when Taurus came running in. Don't worry, I don't think she saw, he added after Monson gave him a sharp look. I was about to leave when I saw you come in, and you happened to be talking to yourself. I admit, my curiosity got the better of me. So, you saw what happened? Yeah, I saw what happened. But before we get into that, first, finish telling me about your dream.
Monson finished the story. He told Grayson about Dawn, Yari, and Guy, though he made sure not to speak Yari and Guy's names aloud. He also told Grayson about the 3 requests that Dawn made, doing his best to relay the information without leaving anything out. He discussed the Magi blades and the strange process to call upon them, including the vague gestures and odd posturing. Monson knew what he was doing was dangerous. He now suddenly found himself steadily being drawn into a world that he knew very little about. He hardly knew Grayson, and yet he was disclosing a great deal about himself. It was a chance he felt he had to take, even if his thirst for knowledge was dulling his better senses. Grayson had knowledge, and at least it seemed somewhat credible, which was more than what Monson could boast. This was his chance, his big chance to find out what was going on. He had to leave everything on the table. No secrets. He needed the information Grayson had, and if he was forced to expose himself, then so be it.
Monson, it's got to be you. You're the only one that could. Grayson, you're so convinced, but you haven't given me a single reason to believe that I'm this being of 7 bloods. What has you so sure? Power, Gray. The part of the prophecy we have says that one of the signs of the being of 7 bloods is power untold. Think of it this way.
He pulled out a piece of paper and pen, and then drew a line across it. He labeled the start of the line 1 and 100 at the end of it. He looked up from the paper.
I told you earlier that AoE, or Area of Influence, is a magical method of using your power of ki.
Monson nodded.
But manipulation isn't the only thing that AoE can do. It can also be an indicator of the potential or residual power of a given individual. The most powerful non-scripting magic user in existence currently is a man named Graven. He's head of our tactical forces. On this scale, he's considered a 75. There were sentinels that had greater raw power in the past. We don't know what happened to them, but they were both at 100. So that is how our scale works based on our strongest reference point. Understand so far?
Monson dipped his head once in sort of a half nod.
Good. Now, understand this. The readings that we got on Barty's Bridge were hundreds of times higher than 75. It was in fact so high, it broke the counter.
Grayson reprieved briefly, just to let the point sink in.
Monson, you are the only survivor from Barty Bridge, which means it has to be you. Look, to be completely straight with you, I'm not even really sure what all...
He pointed to everything in his room.
This means, but my grandfather worked very hard to get this journal, information, and relics to us. I gotta believe there's something to this. I don't know, Grayson.
Monson looked around the room, trying to gather his feelings into some kind of comprehensible state.
If I'm supposed to be some kind of prophetic savior for worlds unknown, why am I here, living a normal life? I wouldn't call freezing a huge fountain in the middle of a heated atrium normal, Monson.
Monson scowled.
No, I wouldn't either, but what you're saying doesn't make any sense. What am I doing here at Collin if I am who you think I am? I don't know anything about magic. Heck, up until yesterday, I didn't even believe it existed. Grayson, if I'm supposed to be some kind of hero whose destiny it is to save millions of people, then wouldn't you think that I'd be locked up somewhere in some bunker protected by...
Monson stopped talking. He remembered something, which made him feel like he had been punched in the gut.
Grayson?
Monson looked straight into Grayson's eyes.
Does the word guardian mean anything to you? Guardian.
Grayson grabbed the journal and flipped it open to one of the last pages. Far from spectacular, this simple drawing was a grouping of symbols placed around one central large one.
These 7 symbols?
Grayson pointed to the different drawings placed evenly around the large center symbol.
Correspond with the 7 murals I mentioned earlier. I think they may be the name of the being shown in each of the paintings, but these 4 gathered around this larger one are completely separate from the main part of the tower. They were found on the southern and northern side of these 2. If you notice, they are the exact opposite of one another.
He pointed to the 2 groupings on the outskirts of the page.
All these symbols exist on the outskirts of the tower, meaning that they are an existence outside. I have a theory about them, but look at this first. Tell me what you see.
He flipped the journal back a page, then reached behind his chair, grabbing a magnifying glass. He turned back towards Monson and the journal. Monson looked closer, sweeping his eyes along the bottom border of the drawing. He was not sure what he was supposed to be seeing.
All I see are statues, carved pillars, and some drawings of people fighting. Exactly. You are Sharp Gray. Do you see anything special about these pillars?
Monson looked again. What was he supposed to be seeing? Think. He knew that most of what he saw was a symbol of some sort. There was some sort of hidden meaning behind all this. There had to be. He closed his eyes and pictured the drawing, trying to mentally place himself into it, trying to place himself there. He touched the journal, placing his hand on the cover, focusing in an attempt to bring it to life. He felt some swirl within him, something that was of him but at the same time not. He concentrated on that motion. He unconsciously traced the symbol on the cover of the journal. Monson heard something within the distant echoes of his brain. There was a flash of blinding light that lit up the room. Pain, that familiar burning sensation, seared and died as the light came over it. Monson opened his eyes and realized that he could not see anything. It was like a strobe light had been placed in front of him
the flash of the light being such a contrast to Grayson's room. He felt exhausted, like his body was at the breaking point. He blinked again. Still nothing. He put his hands on his chair, intending to get up. Under him, he felt cold stone. "What the?" said Monson aloud as he continued to feel the cold, grainy texture. He lifted his hands and set them gently on his face. "Take a deep breath," he said to himself, collecting his thoughts. Grayson. Grayson. He heard nothing. Grayson? Again, nothing. Monson stood up. "Whatever happens, I'm not going to freak out," he told himself. "You've experienced all kinds of freaky stuff. Something weird is going on, but you will remain calm." He opened his eyes. The lights and pain were gone, completely forgotten even. He looked around at his surroundings and suddenly wished the lights, and even the pain, would come back. He was now standing in the middle of a huge, torch-lit hall. Ratty-looking men wearing dirty German uniforms were running in different directions in a great hurry, ignoring him as they passed. He spun on the spot, taking in the whole of his surroundings. He gasped as he saw a mountain-sized, multi-level, three-dimensional mosaic. The huge edifice was located in the exact center of an even larger underground chamber. The expanse of the massive skyscraper-like structure loomed over Monson as he stared up at it. Suddenly, Monson knew exactly where he was. The tower. He was standing in front of the tower, a place recorded in a journal that was written more than 65 years ago. Monson fell to his knees, letting his shock consume him. This is impossible. Monson's disbelief fell wearily upon him. He felt like screaming. Why can't anything be normal? He thought. He was just having a weird but pleasant conversation, and he was finally getting some answers. Why is this happening to me? Howdy. Monson spun to see himself leaning calmly against a pillar a short distance away. Dawn! Monson moved quickly towards him. What are you doing here? Wait, never mind that. Where is here? How did I get here? If you tell me I am where I think I am, even if you do look like me, I'm gonna hit you. Calm down, Monson. Dawn straightened up and walked towards him. Before he had taken more than a few steps, however, one of the dirty, unwashed men came scampering by, totally oblivious to their presence. He was rushing past just when Dawn stumbled forward. Monson closed his eyes, expecting a crash and a stream of swear words. When this did not happen, he opened his eyes to see Dawn's head sticking through the man's chest, as if he were a ghost. Well, if that's not the freakiest thing I've ever seen, you need to relax. Dawn extricated himself from the man's chest, apparently finding it very humorous. You will live longer, you know. Relax? Monson gritted his teeth angrily. How can I relax? In the last 3 days, my already weirder-than-normal life has kicked into overdrive. Between conversations with myself, freaky dreams, my ability to freeze an indoor fountain. Oh, and let's not forget the realization that my quirky antisocial classmate is actually a part of some international organization that's trying to find a mystical being who's destined to save the world. The world, Dawn! What does that even mean? And now, I'm in an underground hall that's supposedly buried deep within the mountains of Europe, surrounded by sweaty, half-starved men, when 2 minutes ago I was sitting in a dormitory in northern Washington state, sipping tea and reading a book. What part of this should I be relaxed about? Dawn hovered between a considering smile and a knowing smirk. Monson shuddered as he looked himself in the eye. He was never going to get used to this. You are right. When you say it like that, it does seem like a bit much. Is there any other form you could take? The whole conversation with myself thing is getting old. You sure are cranky today. Are you not sleeping well?
Monson gave Dawn a glowering look.
Sorry, I was just asking.
Monson dropped it, moving on to more important topics.
Why don't you tell me what's going on? How did I get here?
Dawn grinned outlandishly.
I do not really know. I have never seen anything like this, though I am far from the greatest point of reference. You don't know.
Monson did his best to control his incredulity.
What do you mean, you don't know? Aren't you supposed to be the mentor who guides the hero? Hello, I'm the hero. And if you're not the guide, then, well, you're just an annoying person who talks in my head. Haven't you ever seen Star Wars? No, I cannot say that I have. Grayson's not going to like that.
Monson sighed, one of his rich, heavy sighs plopping down on the ground.
I'm getting too old for this. At the ripe old age of 15, huh?
Dawn's innocent tone was not fooling anyone.
Ready to throw in the hat already? Shut up,
retorted Monson.
And it's throwing the towel, not hat. Whatever. Listen, instead of sitting here wasting air, you could try to figure out why you brought yourself here. What do you mean?
Monson glanced up at Dawn.
Didn't you bring me here? No, I did not. I just came to make sure you did not go back in time or something. Could I do that? Not entirely positive one way or the other, but I did not think I should take the chance. You're no help.
Monson twisted around, surveying his surroundings.
So you have no idea how I got here? No, I have an idea how you got here. I just do not know why. That's comforting.
Monson stood back up and started to move around the chamber, taking in the vast expanse, exerting all his willpower not to become overwhelmed. He tried touching one of the large columns and was surprised when his hand went right through it. A thought came to him.
I'm not really here, am I?
Correct. Dawn beamed encouragingly.
Okay, so I'm not really here,
said Monson again, this time for his own benefit.
And I have obviously never been to Europe, let alone to a secret underground hall that houses massive stone mosaics. So, how is it that I'm here and seeing this? It seems unlikely I transported myself.
Dawn continued to smile as Monson worked through the problem.
Go on.
Monson analyzed and reprocessed the known information.
Okay, I'm leaning towards one of two conclusions, but neither makes sense. Wait a moment.
Monson again tried to touch the closest pillar. His eyes widened as his hand went right through it.
Hold on.
Monson rounded on Dawn.
Earlier I was able to touch that bench over there. What happened? Well, that is interesting. What did happen? You don't know? I cannot say that I do. You bugged me. I do my best. I bet you do.
Monson started to retreat, but Dawn caught his shoulder before he could get very far.
I can offer this, though. If you find your interaction with your environment to be inconsistent, then either you have changed or something has changed within your environment. Either I've changed or something has changed within my environment?
Monson repeated Dawn's words, the phrase streaming from his mind.
Okay, it's obvious that something has changed within this environment. I mean, I was able to touch that bench over there. Now I can't. That must be something with the environment, right? What makes you say that?
Said Dawn in his same casual voice.
But before you do, first answer me this. Do you know enough about the nature of this environment to make that assumption?
Monson thought for a moment.
No, I don't think I do. I think I get what you're hinting at. The logical place to start is to look if anything within myself has changed, in relation to this environment.
Dawn simply smiled in a proud sort of way. Monson understood this to mean he was correct. He resumed his exploration of the central chamber, re-examining the sequence of events that landed him in this strange place. He thought of Grayson and their topic of conversation right before his journey. Monson forced his slightly fuzzy head to focus as he remembered what it was that he was trying to pick out in that conversation. He rewound the relevant thoughts and images and then started from the beginning. Picturing the tower, he focused on how it appeared before him now and the drawing seen in the journal. He recalled the various items found and depicted in the rooms surrounding the central chamber. He pictured the drawing of the angelic figure and the lone being standing distinguished among millions. Finally, he pictured his version of a hero, the type of character that shows up in movies and mangas to save the day. Monson ground his teeth together. He wanted to know. He wanted to understand. That knowledge was the only way he would be able to act. That was the only way he could move forward. He had to know. He had to move forward. He had to believe that he could find out, know, and move forward. Suddenly, something struck Monson. Something so simple that he almost kicked himself for not seeing it sooner.
Knowledge.
Monson addressed Dawn solemnly.
That's what changed. My knowledge of my situation. Bravo.
Dawn clapped his hands.
This is one of the keys of using magic. The understanding of its existence, or the knowledge, and your willingness to believe that knowledge. Belief and knowledge, Monson. Remember this. They are two very powerful concepts, more powerful than you could ever imagine. Fun fact for you, did you know that every human born in this world has the ability to use magic, but most cannot? Why do you think that is? I have no idea. Because they refuse to believe. They refuse to look within themselves and find what has always been there. Wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. I didn't believe in magic. How could I have used it in the atrium? Well, you do not believe consciously, and you're a bit different than most people. Your situation is unique, one might say. It is difficult for you to use and understand magic because not only are you in a world that does not believe in it, but your power has already been made manifest, though you have no actual knowledge how to access and use it, or formal training in the process of creation or transition. Okay.
Monson's mind started to race.
So, what does all that mean? I know now that I have to believe in magic. Does that mean I can use it now? Not exactly. Knowledge does not equal understanding. You need to understand as well.
Dawn gave Monson another coy smile, which sharply reminded Monson that he was talking to himself.
You will not be able to understand magic until you understand the secret of the Magi Blade. Why don't you just tell me? Because if I just tell you, you would not comprehend it. You must realize that for yourself. The concept would impede you and probably kill you in the process.
Monson's eyes narrowed.
I think you just keep secrets just for the fun of it.
Dawn laughed.
Well, you have heard the saying that
Dawn stopped and looked thoughtful.
Everyone has their secrets, right? It would make sense that I have some too. I doubt I have any from you.
Monson glared at Dawn.
Yes, but we have already established that you are special. You really bug me. I know.
Begrudgingly, Monson changed topics.
So, how do I get back? Can you tell me that? Have you finished what you came here to do? I doubt you will be able to get back until you finish that. How do you know that? Just a hunch. Guardians. I was trying to figure out what you were saying about guardians. Since you're here, can you tell me anything about these guardians? Actually, this is one topic that I do not really know any more about than you do. Wait, Dawn, you could be the Guardian. Could that paper be referring to you? No, I do not think so.
Dawn shook his head.
I am more of a safety measure, I think. You think?
Monson's eyebrows shot up.
It is difficult to explain, and it is hardly relevant right now. Let us just say that I am here for a very specific purpose, and that the limitations of that purpose are very defined. I think you and I will understand more once we figure out who put me here.
Monson let his mouth slacken in confusion.
Okay, now you really aren't making any sense. You don't know who put you here? I do not believe I was meant to. They really did not know what was going on. Heck, I am not really even sure. Can you tell me anything as to why you're here?
Dawn smiled.
I am here to protect you.
Monson scowled.
But then wouldn't that make you a guardian? No, I am more akin to a dam than a guardian. A dam. Yes, a dam. I don't understand. No, I do not expect you to.
Monson sighed as he resumed his pacing, not knowing what else to do. His logical reasoning caused him to look around, scrutinizing the whole of it one more time. It was obvious to him there was information here that he needed, but what was it? An idea came to him, and he figured he might as well try it out.
Dawn, can you get me up there?
Monson pointed directly up.
Yes, why? Because I have a theory about this place, and I want to test it out. Sure, hold on.
Dawn lifted his arm in a very phlegmatic way and pointed at Monson. He hesitated.
What's wrong?
Asked Monson. Dawn bit at the corner of his lip.
You will need to close your eyes.
The eyebrow shot up again.
Why? Just trust me. This is not something you are ready to see.
Monson did as he was told.
Is this good enough? Yes. Hold on tight. Hold on to what?
Monson shot into the air like a drunken firecracker. Thankfully, the turbulence only lasted a moment, and he came to an abrupt stop, feeling suddenly as if he were standing firmly on the ground.
Walk around,
yelled Dawn from the ground far below.
You will not fall. I have you.
Monson started to walk around, examining his surroundings, unsuccessfully ignoring the fact that he was suspended many feet in midair. He breathed deeply and continued his search, finding that thus far, nothing really seemed out of the ordinary, at least in the current sense of the word. He idled towards one of the massive support columns laced intermittently throughout the central chamber. He touched it, and found to his delight that if he focused, his hand did not go straight through. It was then that a clue manifested itself.
Dawn, can you join me up here?
Yelled Monson in a hurried voice.
What is up?
Dawn materialized to Monson's side, startling him a bit.
Figure something out? Not quite, but look at this.
Monson pointed at various portions of the tower.
I do not understand what I'm looking at. What is it? I don't know either.
Both Dawn and Monson, floating in midair, facing the huge carved mosaic, stared at it in shock. Approximately halfway to the top, from this vantage point, Monson and Dawn could see all the paths, passages, and stairs that Grayson's grandfather mentioned in the journal. The pictures did not really do the tower justice, and really did not convey how very large and intricate the structure was. Oddly enough, the paths, stairways, and even some of the external carvings were not complete. It seemed like they were a part of some vast, spectacular dream that, in his haste, the dreamer forgot to complete. In the place where these finished products should be, was a glowing ooze of some sort. Monson looked at Dawn, who nodded, and instantly moved them towards one of the missing portions. They touched down near a large spiraling stone staircase on the fourth landing. Momentary distraction blinded them, as the magnificence of the structure wielded its full effect upon both of them. They reveled in the tower's precise carving, artful paintings, and detailed tapestries. Despite this, in the medium of the tower's full effect, the atmosphere got under Monson's skin, a slightly eerie feeling. He found himself thinking that the whole of this place, whatever it was, almost had to be made out of magic, based on what he saw on the landing alone. The paintings, carvings, and other artwork were just a little too surreal to be entirely plausible. He let that concept root and germinate, finding substance within himself. Belief welled up and blossomed from somewhere inside him. He marveled at what an extremely curious revelation it was to suddenly believe. He felt a hand squeeze his shoulder. He turned to see Dawn smiling at him with proud, sappy eyes, like a mother gazing at an obedient child. "You are learning." Monson smiled back, but did not say anything as words were not needed. He could actually feel Dawn's emotions, could feel them coursing towards him. They were exciting and familiar, yet oddly foreign and scary. The feelings boiled over him. The wheels of thought triggered his reminiscence, and peaked as he drew the lines of association, matching up with Dawn's feelings in the shallow vat of his important, but wasting memory. He examined the feelings closely. They felt like they were probing him and were almost exactly like the ones that assaulted him when he first arrived at Collin. He viewed that thought with embarrassment, remembering the emotion and misstep that caused the scene with Kylie. How could he have forgotten that? Monson's mind reeled as he focused on that one question. Was it Dawn that day too? Or yet a better question, who was Dawn? Monson did not know. Regardless of what that experience may mean, one thing was for sure. Dawn was very different from him. To his surprise, Dawn smiled at him with a knowing expression, but shook his head slightly. Monson fought the sudden urge to throw his arms around Dawn and thank him for his concern.
"So, what do you think we're dealing with here?"
Monson occupied himself by walking over to a vacant, glowing portion of the tower's wall.
"There's something incredibly obvious about all this that I think we're missing. Do not look at me. I'm as stumped as you are."
Dawn reached out his hand to touch the glowing space. As he did so, an idea came to fruition in Monson's head.
"Hey, Dawn, have you ever read Harry Potter?"
"What is that?" asked Dawn.
"That's not surprising you wouldn't know. Well, Harry Potter is a book about a boy wizard who's supposed to save wizard kind or something. It was very popular a couple of years back." "I am not entirely sure where you are going with this, Monson," said Dawn with a puzzled look. "What does that have to do with our problem here?" "It was something Grayson said about seeking truth in one of the most invasive ways. When he said that, it reminded me of a conversation that I had with Casey. I didn't really think about it all that much then, but I find that conversation haunting me suddenly. Casey told me that while fantasy stories are fictional writing, they are often the most honest. Why? Because it was something true from the writer himself."
For the first time, Dawn stared at Monson in bafflement. Monson pushed forward.
"Let me explain. I asked Casey once where he got his inspiration for Tournament of Blades. That's the name of his screenplay, in case you were wondering. He said that a lot of it came from pieces of other stories. That's probably why I thought of Harry Potter. I just finished reading it, and there's an element in Casey's screenplay that reminds me of that book. Anyway, Casey also said that often additional inspiration for stories come from the dreams of the author, and these dreams are a glimpse of the inner heart. He went on to say that the inner heart is where truth, universal truth, resides, and that's why fiction can be the most true when it comes to writing. Now, this is the crazy part. what if Grayson believes what Casey believes? That dreams hint at this truth of the inner heart. What if the reason that he reads all those books is that he's trying to find that truth? Basically, my theory would be this. Grayson is looking for the scattered truth of the heart in fiction books, in an attempt to gain insight to these other worlds. It is an interesting theory. Do you have anything else to go on? Take us up a floor, said Monson after a moment of trying to remember the exact layout of the building in front of him. He closed his eyes. There's something I want you to see. Monson smiled inwardly, really glad that Dawn was here. If he had not shown up, Monson would have had to find a way through the glowing portions of nothingness that littered the tower's face. Not that he was terribly worried. He felt confident that it would not hurt him, but nevertheless, he did not want to take that chance. They touched down in front of a very large mural of a being, with long, shiny dark hair and demure hands. The most conspicuous feature, however, was a huge angel-like wingspan that was many feet across. Monson took a step back to take a deep breath. He was not sure what about the view had caught him, but seeing it up close made it feel much more real to him. Apparently, Dawn felt the same way, as his odd expression mirrored Monson's. Dawn stared at the painting with a look that Monson could not begin to understand, and for some reason, he felt right now probably was not the time to ask. What do you see? Monson tried to act as if he had not noticed Dawn's behavior. Dawn gave a shake, as if he was coming out of a deep reverie. I do not really know. Some sort of being that has wings, I guess. Exactly. If you open up any religious book, one of the first things you're going to read about is heavenly beings known as angels. Yeah? So? Stay with me for a moment. All at once, Monson started talking very fast. The day that Casey told me about the dreams and storytelling, I have to admit, I really had no idea what he was talking about. But that, in conjunction with Grayson's truth, that almost has to be it. And I think this angel fits into that theory. He was trying to gain insight to the truth, whatever that may be, through the dreams of others. You are going to need to explain that one. If this hall is as old as Grayson's grandfather thought it was, it's probably one of the first structures built when this world was created. The first time I saw it, I thought that this might be a replica of what someone saw in a church or religious building, that this might be one of those underground places of worship that Christians used in the 1st and 2nd centuries before Constantine the Great converted in the 3rd. But what if it's the other way around? Dawn's jaw dropped as he finally realized what Monson was getting at. Monson just looked sheepish at him for a moment. Dawn finally spoke. So, you actually think that a being like this, Dawn pointed towards the painting, could really exist? I don't know. Monson shook his head. But prophets of old saw dreams or visions and claimed them as truth. What if those prophets had contact not with a heavenly visitor, but with a being like this one, and simply wrote how they saw it in the context that they understood it, i.e. that these beings were from God? Millions of people worship based on that belief, on that faith, so why couldn't Grayson? Why couldn't Grayson take the dreams of other sources and try to find the partial truth in them? Let's face it, stranger things have happened. Take you as an example. I still don't know what you are or even what you really look like. I'm not even sure you aren't a figment of my imagination, and I'm not totally insane. You have a point. This is all a bit much to take in. I don't know what's impossible or possible, so I don't think it's best to limit myself regardless of what I know to be true. But let's put that discussion aside for a moment. What I was really trying to say is, if there is any merit to what Grayson was trying to do, I think I may have figured out what here is. And you're saying that Harry Potter and this Tournament of Blades story has helped you figure this out? They really must be good stories. Yeah, both are great stories, but I can't say anything else or Casey will be pissed. He hates spoilers. Why? It's a long story. Well, give me the punchline then.
Monson took a deep, steadying breath, then plunged forward with his theory.
Okay, there was this one particular scene in Tournament of Blades that I was thinking of. In it, the main character, Alex Cherish, with help from his friend Uncle Velvet, is pursuing the bad guys, who are all sneaking around in a museum in New York. They tried to move around quietly, hoping not to arouse suspicion, but were upset when they realized that the bad guys had given them the slip. The weird thing was that these bad guys had lost Alex and Uncle V after ducking into a room with no windows, no doors, and no other exits. I think I know where this is heading. You're sharper than me then, because I had no idea. In the next chapter, they realized that the bad guys were using books as sort of a pathway to a kind of false world. And you think that you have been sucked into a book? No, not exactly. I think that the power within myself, or the magic that resides in me, took what I found in that book and brought it to life. How in the name of all the gods in heaven did you come to that conclusion? The missing portions of the tower were the key.
Monson looked towards a section of glowing nothingness, not far from where they were standing.
See, the magic can only take you so far. It was able to get us to this point because it used what was in the journal as a reference. Actually, it gave us more. There are feelings in this place. Feelings that aren't mine and that I can't associate with, but they are there nonetheless. I think this magic not only recreated this place, but perhaps implanted the intent from the original author as well. However, it can't create what's not there. Hence the missing portions of the total picture and the odd sporadic movements of the men down below. But why are we here then? I think that's the easy part. It was because I was so desperate to know what all this meant. My emotions, my true emotions, that seemed to be rooted into some deep part of my inner self, made it all possible. I was able to access it because of the way I felt. It's a funny thing what these concoctions of feelings can do. Belief, knowledge, and truth are all truly affected by them.
Monson paused.
Or maybe it's the other way around.
Amazing. Don brought his hands together as if he were a teacher congratulating a student.
Absolutely amazing, Monson Grey. So I'm right,
said Monson in an excited voice, finally feeling that his crazy world was starting to make some sense.
Oh, I have no idea,
answered Don, smiling.
But it all sounds very good.
Monson had to admit, that rained on his parade a bit. However, the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. If there was another explanation, it would be hard-pressed to fill in the holes like he just did. Don spoke up.
So, now that you understand what here is and how you got here, why are we here? What is so important about these guardians that you need to recreate?
He pointed to the tower and the surrounding area.
All this. Now that's the question, isn't it?
Monson refocused his attention back to the angelic figure. He gazed at it intently.
When I see this, it makes me feel like there's more to all this than just me. The word guardian implies that someone or something is guarding. And if I'm who Grayson thinks I am, then that would imply what is being guarded here is, well, me. But why? And from what? And what about the final entry in the journal? A simple picture with a bunch of random symbols? Of all the things that Grayson's Gramps could have told us, why that?
I give up, said Don. I do not know any more than you. Actually, it is kind of depressing that you are working this out faster than I am.
But how can you not know? Weren't you the one that brought it up in the first place?
Yes, well, it is kind of hard to explain. It is like I have these recurring thoughts in my head, telling me to do certain things and keep you from doing others. My form, for example. I do not know why, but revealing my true form would be very dangerous to you.
whenever I think about doing it, feelings of restraint stop me. I do not really know what exactly to make of all this. Hopefully we can get some answers at some point, but I do know that you are important to the future, that many things have been done for your sake, and that I am here to protect you."
Monson was taken aback by this declaration. He considered it.
"I don't know that we can do much more without further information." "It would appear that way."
Dawn took a deep breath.
"Before we go, there was something I wanted to talk to you about." "What was that, Dawn?"
Monson turned back towards Dawn.
"I didn't catch that last—"
Monson stopped mid-sentence as he gazed at Dawn's face. Dawn's eyes rolled into the back of his head just as his body started to go limp. Monson screamed out, comprehension slapping him. "Dawn!" Monson tried to reach for Dawn, but stopped as he felt a sudden shift in the stone landing that he was standing on. Before he knew what was happening, the magical world he had suddenly been thrust into was just as quickly dissolving around him. That experience was like none Monson had ever known. His heart felt heavy as the images that had been so real moments earlier melted away in a burst of energy-infused light. As the light and chunks of magically created material rushed towards Monson, he had the fleeting thought that this was probably what aliens felt like in outer space. He laughed at himself. Oh, did he hope this would not hurt. Monson awoke suddenly as he felt something very cold drip down his head. A sharp pain shot violently through his muscles, reverberating as his consciousness stirred. Images of the magical hall sprang to the forefront of his mind as he remembered Dawn and the revelations of the afternoon. He moved his body slightly, trying to get a feel for his surroundings, when he realized that he was lying down and that he was shirtless. He felt very cool, but at the same time, his skin felt like a hot poker was being lightly drawn across his body. It was that sensation that brought him out of his vegetative state. He could no longer fight it. He opened his eyes.
"You're awake, I see."
The familiar voice of Grayson came from a dimly lit room.
"Where am I?"
Monson's dry, husky voice cracked as he spoke.
"Hold on."
Grayson placed his hands on Monson and, despite the difficulty from being confined to the wheelchair, helped him sit up.
"You have been out for 4 or 5 hours, and your fever just broke. Here, drink this."
A cool glass touched Monson's lips, and he drank deeply as he felt cold, clean water, laced with a sort of mint, appease his dried and soiled constitution. He felt suddenly refreshed.
"What's going on?"
Monson looked over at Grayson, who was sitting in his chair smiling gently. Monson's vision was adjusting, but he could still hardly see.
"I was hoping you could tell me."
Grayson placed the glass of water into Monson's hand.
"Do you remember what happened?" "I remember we were talking about some myth and that somehow I'm supposed to save the world. But after that, it gets a bit blurry." "Well, before I tell you what happened, to illustrate, you should look around." "Illustrate what?"
Grayson put up a hand to silence him, then a single finger. He pulled out some sort of remote, which he pointed at the wall. Suddenly, the lights came on.
"Oh my,"
Monson said in a breath of disbelief as he took in his surroundings. The room looked like a small tornado landed and had hung out for a while. Grayson's books, computer, posters, and random belongings were ripped, tattered, and shredded. The chairs and tables were contorted to the point where it resembled modern stylized art. Large gashes in the walls looked as if beefy men with axes got drunk and mistook them for a really obnoxious tree. Monson realized that something terrible had happened while he was asleep. He lowered his gaze, unable to look at Grayson. Grayson, again, just smiled. "I'm quite all right," said Grayson, reading the look on Monson's face. "You don't have to worry. I don't remember the last time I had such an evening." "How can you say that? I did this, didn't I? Whatever happened to me when I touched that journal caused this destruction. You could have been killed. How can you be so calm?" "I told you, Monson. I knew something like this could happen. I don't claim to be an expert in magic or know what you are, but I do know that you are important to the future. And if I have to die for you in the process, well, so be it." As an almost involuntary reflex, Monson's hand slowly rose and covered his eyes. What in the world was he? What was he doing in this world if he was not a part of it? "I know that you're confused, but you aren't alone. And I don't mean just me either." "What do you mean?" Monson looked up towards Grayson. "Who else knows about this?" "No, that's not what I meant," said Grayson with a slight headshake. "You're probably wondering how I remained unharmed, while my room looks like its contents had a close encounter with a very large blender." Monson paused as he realized what Grayson was saying. Now that he thought about it, Grayson did not appear to have any conspicuous injuries, and if his comments were taken at face value, he had been taking care of Monson for the better part of the afternoon. Perhaps Grayson was more powerful than he was letting on. "The thought had crossed my mind." Monson sat up. "Can you tell me exactly what happened when I went under?" "Most of it is kind of fuzzy. We were just sitting there talking about, shoot, I don't even remember now, when you closed your eyes and started breathing deeply. I spoke to you a bit, and for a moment, it was as if you were sleeping. Then, all of a sudden, a weird sort of energy or light spread around you, and then it expanded like a sort of shell or cocoon." "Wait!" Something came sharply back to Monson. "What did it look like? The energy or light, was it material or tangible, or was it more like electrical energy?" "What an odd question," said Grayson with a thoughtful look. "I don't even really know. I remember feeling like it was something that if I got close enough, that I might be able to hold it." "What happened after that?" "Well, the light or power or whatever gathered around you." Grayson looked towards the ceiling, apparently replaying the moment in his mind. "There was a plethora of pulsating colors that mingled and strove against one another. Then it was like one of those colors or powers or whatever it was gave way. It stayed there momentarily, then it shot out in every direction like you were a radar tower." "What? Like a radar tower?" "Yeah," said Grayson. "That's the only way I can think to describe it. The energy was pulsating, and then it was like I could feel it rushing out to fill the empty space around us. It was a very weird feeling." "What happened next?" "All of this." Grayson indicated to the massive amounts of destruction. "It was a bit scary," he said as an afterthought. "But that still doesn't explain how you came out with everything intact." "I'm not really sure how that happened either. It happened so fast. By the time I really understood what was going on, it was all over. I do remember the feeling like someone wrapped their arms around me, though. Like my mom used to do, you know?" He hesitated for the briefest second, then continued. "Everything that came toward me just seemed to miss after that. And then you fell to the floor. I've been watching over you ever since." Monson bit his lip. "Grayson, what do you think we're dealing with here?" Grayson shook his head. "I don't know. If that was Ki, then it was unlike any Ki I've ever experienced. Ki is uniform in its construction, consistency, and even its coloring. This power, whatever it was
was none of those things. How odd.
Both boys sat in reflective silence.
Monson, you haven't heard the really weird part yet.
Monson's eyes locked with Grayson.
You mean weirder than all this?
He motioned around the room. Grayson bobbed his head up and down slowly.
Yeah, Gray. Look at your right hand.
Monson looked down to stare at his right hand. His scars. They were gone. Monson stood up, went to the small fridge and opened it. He searched for a moment and spotted some bottles of water, grabbed one, opened it, and downed half of it in 2 large gulps. He looked over at Grayson, who was still deep in thought.
So, what do we do now?
Monson, why aren't you saying anything?
Because I have nothing to say. At least about that.
Monson repeated his question.
So, what do we do now?
I'm not sure there's really anything that we can do. I think you need to put in some serious time to get control of your powers.
And how the heck do you suppose I do that? If it was that easy, don't you think I would have done it already?
I understand that. Grayson attempted to maintain his calm demeanor. I think we need to put some thought into this Magi blade hype that your dream provided. Don said that was the key, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. But it's not that easy. The only thing I know about magic is that I have to believe it exists. Where do I go from there?
Again, I don't have any answers for you, but in a matter of 2 days, I've seen you use magic not once, but twice. And though it was inadvertent, it was conscious. Maybe you should start there. Take some time, find a secluded spot, and try to access your power without destroying stuff.
Well, I can't think of a better idea. I guess I could give it a try.
One more thing. You should probably tell Arthur and Casey. They aren't stupid, and you don't want them to find out without an explanation. It's better if you explain to them and swear them to secrecy.
Yeah, I already promised Casey I would tell him what's been going on, so you don't have to worry about that. Besides, I have something I need to discuss with both of them anyway.
What would that be?
Never mind, it's not important. Is there anything else? Because I should probably get back to my place.
Yeah. I would try to make up with Taurus as well.
Why?
Monson went slightly red at the turn in the conversation. Gray, you froze most of the inner plumbing of the atrium, just from getting upset. I think we need to nip that before you cause the first snowstorm in Corrin's history.
Ha. While we're making requests, I do have one of my own. While I'm doing all this training and damage control, can you make me a copy of that journal in English? I have a feeling that there's more to learn there. I need answers, and I don't know how I'm going to get them otherwise.
Will do, said Grayson. And remember to be careful. Monson started to move towards the door.
I will, Grayson. Thanks. Do you want me to help you, clean up this mess?
No, said Grayson with a smile and a slight shake of his head. I have people to do that sort of stuff.
All right. Well, keep in touch.
Yeah, you too. With that, Monson opened the door and left, leaving a thoroughly destroyed room behind him.